between the Hells Angel and a rival gang may have been in retaliation for murder.
Members of the Hells Angels
and police investigating the Hells Angels
and hoping that this will wipe out the entire organization.
Chapter have
the Hells Angels.
In the world of outlaw motorcycle clubs, few names strike fear like Necati Arabaci. Known as the most brutal president of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, Arabaci's reign left a trail of violence, intimidation, and unyielding power. A man whose name became synonymous with terror, both on the streets and in the dark corners of the criminal underworld, Arabaci's leadership was marked by extreme ruthlessness. His story is one of power, bloodshed, and a legacy that continues to echo through the halls of the Hells Angels. The brutal rise of Necati Arabaci. Necati Arabaci wasn't born into luxury. Born in Turkey, his life was shaped by hardship and struggle, which eventually led him down a path that would forever mark him in the criminal underworld. But it wasn't until he joined the Hells Angels that he truly found his place. Arabaci didn't just join a motorcycle club, he rose to the top of one of the most feared organizations in the world. And let me tell you, his rise was anything but ordinary. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, the Hells Angels were expanding their empire. They weren't just a club for bikers, they were becoming a global force. The Turkish chapter, under Arabaci's leadership, would become one of the most ruthless factions within the Hells Angels network. But to get there, Arabaci had to prove he was more than just another biker. Arabaci was no stranger to violence. He understood the code of the streets, the world where loyalty and brutality are your greatest assets. His charisma and cold-blooded nature quickly set him apart. Rising through the ranks, he earned the title of President of the Turkish chapter, a position that came with immense power and immense danger. But this wasn't just about running a local gang. Arabaci was building an empire, and he made sure everyone knew it. A reign of terror, brutality, and fear. When Necati Arabaci took the reins of the Turkish chapter, things quickly took a dark turn. Forget about smooth talks and negotiations. Arabaci ruled with an iron fist, using fear as his main tool to keep control. This wasn't just about riding bikes and partying. It was about dominating the streets, intimidating anyone who dared to challenge him, and making sure everyone knew that crossing the Hells Angels under his command meant facing the consequences. Arabaci was a master of intimidation. He enforced loyalty with violence, sending messages to enemies with savage beatings and even executions. If you crossed him or showed any sign of betrayal, your survival chances were slim to none. Arabaci's world wasn't for the faint-hearted. He ran a brutal regime where weakness was a death sentence. His reputation as a ruthless leader was cemented through his sheer, terrorizing presence. Under Arabaci, the Turkish chapter didn't just engage in small-time crime. They were making waves on a global scale. Rival motorcycle clubs, drug cartels, even corrupt law enforcement, none were safe from Arabaci's wrath. His presidency became synonymous with chaos. In his eyes, the Hells Angels weren't just a club, they were a family. And like any good family, betrayal was the ultimate sin. Arabaci's rule wasn't just about making money, it was about absolute dominance. If you crossed him, even once, you'd pay the price. The Turkish chapter, with Arabaci at the helm, became feared by both friends and enemies alike. Arabaci didn't just want respect, he wanted terror. The club's name was spoken in hushed tones, and even the toughest rival gangs began to hesitate when they heard the Turkish chapter was coming. Building an empire, drugs, extortion, and human trafficking. Arabaci's criminal operations weren't limited to the local scene. Once he took control of the Turkish chapter, he made sure the club expanded its reach. We're talking drugs, extortion, and even human trafficking. Under Arabaci's guidance, the Hells Angels Turkish chapter became a significant player in the illicit trade. The drug trade, in particular, flourished as they smuggled narcotics across borders, using their global network to avoid detection. But it wasn't just about the drugs. Arabaci and his crew were involved in extorting money from businesses and individuals who found themselves unable to pay the price for protection. Human trafficking also became part of their portfolio, something that only deepened their grip on the international criminal scene. Arabaci wasn't afraid to use force to maintain control, and this ruthless approach earned him the title of one of the most dangerous figures in the Hells Angels organization. Despite his charm, Arabaci's business wasn't about making friends, it was about making money. And to do that, he needed power. That power came from a combination of street-level violence and high-level criminal alliances. His ability to juggle these elements and run such a sprawling empire is what set him apart. Global network. Alliances with other criminal groups. Arabaci knew that to truly grow the Turkish chapter, he had to look beyond his borders. The Hells Angels Turkish operations weren't isolated. They were part of a much larger criminal network that stretched across Europe and beyond. Arabaci forged alliances with other outlaw motorcycle clubs and criminal organizations, which allowed him to expand the reach of his illicit dealings. This global alliance opened doors for Arabaci's chapter to import and export a range of contraband, drugs, weapons, and stolen goods across international borders. With allies in Europe and elsewhere, the Turkish chapter became a hub for a sprawling network of crime that connected people, products, and violence across countries. These connections didn't just make them rich, they made them untouchable. But running a criminal empire comes with risks, and Arabaci was no stranger to the dangers of this life. His web of alliances, while powerful, also meant he had a lot to lose. Betrayals, police pressure, and rival gangs were constant threats to his reign. Still, Arabaci seemed to thrive on this chaos, always staying one step ahead. Cracks in the empire, law enforcement, and betrayals. In the world of crime, power is never permanent. No matter how strong you are, eventually, the law catches up. Despite Arabaci's well-oiled operation, cracks started to appear. Law enforcement began to take a closer look at the Turkish chapter, and investigations into Arabaci's dealings intensified. The very empire he built was beginning to unravel under the weight of the scrutiny. But it wasn't just the police that posed a threat. As with many criminal organizations, internal betrayals began to surface. Arabaci's iron-fisted leadership made sure there was no room for weakness, but even the most ruthless leaders can't control everything. Infighting and jealousy spread within his ranks, creating instability that he couldn't manage with threats alone. Arabaci had built a global criminal network, but his empire's foundation, violence and intimidation, was starting to crack. The once feared president of the Turkish chapter began to feel the heat from every direction. His empire, once thriving on fear and respect, was slowly disintegrating. Necati Arabaci, the fall of a fearsome biker kingpin. Necati Arabaci's reign at the top of the Hells Angels Turkish chapter was like a roller coaster ride, fast, brutal, and full of bloodshed. But in 2010, that ride came to an abrupt halt. After years of building an empire rooted in violence, drugs, and extortion, the law finally caught up with him. The biker president, who once commanded fear and respect from allies and enemies alike, was taken down in a massive raid. But the story of Necati Arabaci is far from over, and his downfall is as dramatic as his rise. The sudden collapse, Turkish raids and arrest. For years, Necati Arabaci had been untouchable. Under his rule, the Hells Angels Turkish chapter thrived on illicit dealings, drug trafficking, and violent intimidation. But as with most criminal empires, nothing lasts forever. In 2010, the authorities decided it was time to take down one of the most feared figures in the outlaw biker world. In a coordinated, high-stakes operation, Turkish authorities launched a series of raids across the country targeting the Hells Angels operations. Arabaci, along with several of his associates, was arrested on a range of serious charges, including organized crime, drug trafficking, and even murder. When the news broke, it sent shockwaves through the criminal world. The man who had terrorized rivals and kept his chapter tightly controlled was now behind bars. His downfall wasn't just a personal defeat, it was a blow to the entire Hells Angels empire. The Turkish chapter, once a ruthless force under Arabaci's rule, was left in disarray. A legacy of fear and respect. Despite his capture, Necati Arabaci's legacy is far from gone. His fall only added to the myth surrounding his reign. Arabaci's approach to leadership, brutal, unforgiving, and fiercely loyal, became a blueprint for how the Hells Angels operated, not just in Turkey, but across the globe. He was a man who demanded respect, and if that respect wasn't given, he took it with force. Arabaci's rise to power was built on a foundation of fear, and it worked. He controlled the Turkish chapter with an iron fist, and his violent methods, whether through savage beatings, brutal extortion tactics, or cold-blooded murders, instilled terror in both his enemies and those within his ranks. Yet, despite his reign of violence, Arabaci was also respected. He was a leader who commanded loyalty, and that loyalty, in turn, kept his empire running smoothly. What made Necati Arabaci different from other criminals? He was both feared and respected. His ability to blend ruthless aggression with strategic alliances made him a powerful figure, and his rise through the Hells Angels wasn't just a story of crime, it was a story of domination. His methods of control became the gold standard for his chapter and beyond. Arabaci didn't just make his mark as a brutal leader, he shaped the culture of the Hells Angels in ways that are still felt today. The downfall. The price of power. The downfall of Necati Arabaci wasn't just a moment of legal victory for the authorities. It was a stark reminder that, in the world of crime, power is always fleeting. Despite all his achievements in building a powerful empire, the law had the last word. The raids that led to his arrest were the result of years of mounting pressure from law enforcement. As much as Arabaci's empire seemed untouchable, the authorities had finally connected the dots and gathered enough evidence to bring him down. The moment Arabaci was taken into custody marked the end of an era for the Turkish chapter of the Hells Angels. But for those who lived through it, the legacy of his leadership would not be easily forgotten. His ruthless, no-holds-barred approach to both crime and leadership left an indelible mark on the Hells Angels. Thanks for watching. Please like the video, press the subscribe button, and also drop your thoughts in the comment section.